So I've done this clinic once before, and it's about gravity and how it affects how our models move, particularly how they may move in like videos and recordings, and to try and make my goal is to try and make things look less jerky and more realistic. Many of our models look great when they're stationary, perhaps a little bit less so when we actually try and do videos and so on. So this might be a short a short presentation, but hopefully you'll have some questions at the end and we can discuss it, because these are just my ideas. I'm trying to spark a discussion here. So let's move forward. So gravity, it is a bit of a problem, and it's why our models tend to jiggle around, and movement never really looks that realistic in our layout. Trains jiggle from side to side too much and too fast, and other animations, though they're kind of cutesy, they never look quite right in my estimation. They either look too jerky or too fast and a little bit weird. Some technologies get a bit better at that, but it never quite looks right to me. And of course, real water is one of those things that are affected by these same issues. And if you extra issues, it never looks right on a model, right? We should never use real water, though some people try. It doesn't look right and it doesn't move right. So what I want to try and talk about just really quickly here is, why is this a problem and can we do anything about it? And of course, we cannot escape gravity. You may have read T.S. Eliot's poem about cats. Macavity, Macavity, there's no one like Macavity. He's broken every human law, he breaks the law of gravity. Well, we can't do that. So we're stuck with gravity the way it actually is. So I have a couple of videos here to try and show you what I mean. One of them is from my good friend Burr Stewart. Hopefully this will play right here. I don't know, I tried it. But if I play this, you might see. Hopefully if you saw that, and I don't know how well he's come across on the call, but the way that caboose wiggled over that joint there is that really fast wiggling as it comes over the joint. And that's one of the things I'm trying to figure out ways we can actually get better. And going forward a little bit further, here's an animation from a British model, which is kind of cute. The little bicycle runs around the track. Let me just get rid of the sound there. Runs around the track. And it looks kind of cute. It's like a Magna Rail thing. Yeah, you shouldn't be hearing anything. But it's that movement just kind of jerky, looks a little bit weird. And that's the kind of thing which is really hard to get rid of in our models because of the way gravity actually affects them. So, hopefully those videos came across. I know videos don't really share very well on here, but hopefully that came across a little bit. So at the heart of this, what is the problem? And I think some of us might understand this, but one of the answers here is quite interesting. Our models are really very light. They have too little mass in them. But on the other hand, the effective gravity in our models is actually way too high. And that too high gravity is way much more of an influence than the fact they have too little mass, in my estimation. We can actually have a look at that. By the way, for the pedants amongst us, what is the difference between mass and weight? You don't need to read this stuff, right? But mass is what physicists use. It's the amount of stuff in an object. It doesn't change when you're in deep space floating around. It's the same thing. But weight is actually how that mass translates to that force of gravity on the surface of, say, a planet, particularly Earth, right? Or particularly in Colorado in our cases. That weight can be is really what affects how our models actually operate and move along the surface of the planet, but the mass does too. So the momentum of our stuff, when it moves along the track, momentum, the physicists will know, is mass times velocity, and real trains have an awful lot of momentum because they have an awful lot of weight. But that weight doesn't scale linearly in a model. If we take a model and reduce it by, I picked HO scale, and reduce it in scale, that locomotive might weigh a pound, but that prototype K27 might weigh, 137,000 pounds. Usually we think about weight scaling because of the volume of something, a block of wood or an apple. It scales by the volume of it. But if it's an HO scale, the length times the width times the height, that's 1/658,000th of the real scale. It's really reduced by a lot, and that's probably how the actual mass or weight of the thing is actually reduced. And if that thing called momentum, how smoothly our things run down the track, that's another scale of an 87th when we look at the speed. That comes to like 157 millionth of the momentum that a real locomotive or train has on our models. So our trains will never replicate the movement of the prototype. Sure, we can add flywheels in there. Their goal is to add momentum, that spinning mass as momentum, but it's going to be really hard to replicate that smooth movement of a train down the track. Just because our things weigh so little and they're going so slow, that momentum is actually going to be tiny. And just an illustration here, I've got a picture of a British locomotive sitting on the side of its prototype. It's just how small they are compared to the real thing. It's just amazing that we'd like to think they run with the same amount of momentum, but they actually cannot. So, so our mass scale's like too small, but gravity is the opposite. Gravity, physicists will tell you that gravity is a force that keeps us sat in our chair or nailed to the surface of the planet. But gravity is also an acceleration, and they're equivalent things. If you're in an elevator that suddenly goes up, you feel like you're heavier as the elevator accelerates, and when it stops and it goes up, you feel lighter. And from a physical point of view, it's really hard to differentiate what's happening there. It really is that force and that acceleration are equivalent ways of measuring the effective gravity on our bodies. So the weight of something has no impact on that acceleration that something falls at, and Galileo proved that in Pisa in 1590 when no one believed him, but he dropped, I think it was a wooden ball and a cannonball off the Tower of Pisa. They hit the ground at the same time. Everybody thought the wooden ball would fall slower than the heavy ball. No, the weight has no impact, but they accelerate towards the ground, and it's at a standard speed, 9.8 meters per second. Stuff accelerates towards the Earth's surface. You might say, who cares about any of this? Well, if you drop an apple or a brass K27 locomotive off a real 100-foot bridge, it will reach the ground in 2.5 seconds. That's just what the equation says. If it's an apple or a cannonball or a wooden ball, drop it off that bridge and it will go down to the ground in 2.5 seconds. But what if you drop that expensive brass locomotive off an HO model of that bridge that's only 14 inches high? It will reach the ground in about 1/4 of a second. So if you were living in that little model world, that HO world, looking at stuff falling around you, you would believe you lived in a world that had gravity that was about 10 times more than what we live in our real world out here. So that gravitational force that's 10 times stronger than what you think is affecting everything in that model. It's making it move. And by the way, if we were miniaturized, like going in that movie, was it Fantastic Voyage, into our model worlds, or in Beetlejuice, that movie where they miniaturize themselves going in the model, we'd be squished flat on the ground. Our organs would be mushed. We couldn't walk. Gravity would actually kill us if we actually did that. So what I've tried to show here is that our models live in a world where everything's too light, but gravity is really, really strong. And that has a weird effect on how our models move. So here's an interesting idea. I don't know if you can see me on the camera, but a freight car, now I've got one in my hand here. A freight car is like an upside down pendulum. It's kind of riding on the tracks and rocking from side to side, but all the weight's near the bottom. So it's a pendulum that's actually very, very, very short as it wobbles around. So it wobbles really quick. All that weight's really close, and it's the length of a pendulum that adjusts its speed. And that's how we adjust an old clock. You make the pendulum a little bit longer by turning the screw, it makes it a bit longer. It doesn't matter how heavy the weight on the end is, you just make it a little bit longer. So because we've got this really, really short pendulum and this really, really strong gravity, if you think about our freight car as an upside down pendulum really wobbling kind of like this, it's doing it really quick, about 10 times more than what you would see the real thing doing on a track. And that kind of makes sense that we've got that wobble. It's really hard to make our models actually move realistically and not wobble around. And that's a jiggling I'm referring to in this. It's really a tough thing to solve. I had an idea about how you might solve that, and I haven't tried it yet. But one idea is, if add weight to your freight cars, it won't change that wobbling. 'Cause remember, weight doesn't really affect it. But if you added that weight to the roof and not to the frame of the freight car, not the chassis, that would make that pendulum effectively longer, moving the center of gravity further away. That would make it wobble more slowly. Putting weight on the roof, will it make it more unstable, cause more derailments? Probably, but it is a way that we could maybe consider making that movement smoother instead of wobbling quite so much. Something to think about. If anyone wants to experiment with that, I think that would be cool, and that'd be really cool to actually see that. So just in summary, what's this all mean? On our layouts, gravity is too strong, cannot be changed. Our models have far too little mass. So stuff them with lead, maybe stick it on the roof. And I think it's like watching a hummingbird move in our layouts rather than watching an eagle soar around. So that's where we get the jiggly motion. The period of wobble is too high. And it's not just our trains. Effectively, any animation looks bad, wobbly, jerky because of that, whether it's those magno rail things moving around I showed you earlier, moving road vehicles, other animations, they always tend to look just bad movement, bad, wobbly, and jerky. In movies, when they use miniatures to shoot a movie, they've kind of sorted this. They actually shoot at high speed and then play that back at normal speed. It gives you a slow motion and makes that movement smoother if they're using models of trains or cars, or particularly even ships at sea. The movies have got a real way to actually do that. Of course, these days, most of that stuff is done with CGI, computer-generated imagery. But they found a way around it. When our models, we're kind of stuck with what we got. We don't want to be, we can't run our trains in slow motion unless you're making a video. Maybe you could. So we're kind of stuck with actually what we've got. Water's another issue. It's subject to all of those same issues of mass and gravity. If you choose to use real water to get the movement, very few people actually choose to do that. But the other issue with water, of course, is the surface tension of water. Which is far more visible on models at a small scale than it is in the real world. And surface tension doesn't scale at all on models. So the result of that is if we choose to use real water, and some people do, by the way, Miniature Wonderland, that wonderful model railroad, Germany's biggest tourist attraction in Hamburg, they have some areas that use real water with ships on floating around and moving, hauled by magnets underneath. But there, the waves move too fast. They move at their real world speed. That speed doesn't scale. The waves are too smooth because of the surface tension. Of course, there's no spray or foam, and the model boats jiggle around too much on the water. Again, the movies use CGI to fix all of that, but it's worth looking at some movies of Miniature Wonderland in Hamburg in Germany and see how they've done it. They had a cunning solution to one scene they've done about, I think it's down in Argentina, the south coast of Argentina or Chile around Cape Horn. They had an ocean scene that was really some fabric with servos underneath pushing up and down to make the waves move in a realistic way, a nice slow speed, so no real water. Then they used an overhead projector to project an image of water and foam on there around the boats they had on there. And they managed to create a scene with, I think, fishing boats in this really rough water that moves realistically, but it looks very real, but it's not real water. It's cloth and servos and images projected on it. It's a pretty cool solution, quite complex. They have a very large budget to actually do this stuff, but it's worth looking at some YouTube videos actually about that. Go ahead. So at the end of all this, talked about some interesting theory. What can we do? There's really no perfect answer, but we can create a better illusion. And I like to think that our models are all about illusions. To me, it's theatre. And if you go to the theatre and watch a play, it doesn't have to be perfectly realistic. We actually know that we're doing an illusion. We look at the stage, we make accommodations for it. And I'm the same when I look at a model, we make accommodations for it. Of course, larger scales look better, so they're closer to having all of these forces working better. And in a weird way, the very small scales like M and smaller also tend to look okay. And I think that's because these little jiggles that irritate me so much, they're too small to see. So it seems to be HO and S and things like that are in that bad spot where this stuff looks bad. I mentioned try adding weight on the roof, not the floor, to lengthen the length of that pendulum. Maybe that will work, I do not know. Look from further away and you won't notice it. That's maybe cheating a little bit. If our track's better, that video I showed from Bursley out, I deliberately picked a video of it going over a big bump in the track over a lift bridge. Lay better track, it might look better, and make sure that
Can
your
you see?
wheels and make
Can
sure
you
your
see it?
wheels and bogey. I think someone needs
Oh,
muting there
it's
if one
not
of the
turning.
co-hosts can do that. Avoid real water and minimize the animations. But of course, remember, we're creating an illusion. We know that. It won't be perfect, but I'd love to hear your ideas about, was this kind of interesting for thoughts? Do you care? I'd be love to hear it. So that's just my little short brain dump on the world of physics and gravity, on how our models move and actually how they look. So it looks like there's a few questions in the chat, Mark. I'll stop sharing and then we can actually maybe look at some of those. Or is everyone stunned silence? What on earth was he rabbiting on about for 15 minutes? But anyway,
It's okay. I love physics.
cool. Did I give you guys something to think about?
Hey, Robin.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll jump in here. I try and stop that jiggly movement by tightening one of the trucks
Yeah,
in each car to the point where it still moves, but it's hard against the bolster so that it reduces that side to side movement a lot.
I
I
think that's a
actually have
common.
I actually have more of a problem with the stretching that occurs on a train and the caboose ending up jumping back and forth as it goes down. Exactly.
Yeah,
And I'll take a toothpick sometimes, a piece of a toothpick, and I'll jam it into the coupler so that there's no slack.
yeah.
And it kind of reduces that. But for a video, that's the one that I have the biggest problem with.
Yeah, no, I agree that I think in England we call it like 3-point suspension. So you only have 3 degrees of movement. So you have one looser truck and the other solid, and that
Right.
really reduces that jiggling. And I know what you mean. You often see the caboose coming on, it's going ooh ooh ooh,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's slack coming up and down the train. It's a real world problem too. But I think that frequency of oscillation, that period of oscillation, is worse on our models. It
Mhm.
picks up more with the KD couplers with their little springs in them. It's a little
That little spring.
yeah. Oddly enough, as you may know, or you may not care, right? But some of the British 00 models use those old tension lock couplers, which grip like that. There's no springiness in them. And once they're moving, they move fairly smoothly, but there's so many other problems with them. I don't want to go down that road. But the KDs have that little bit of give in them
Yeah.
in the draw gear, and so it does create that movement. But good point, Steve. Was there anything in the chat, Mark?
Yeah, there's a couple of things.
Okay.
One, I was curious what your thoughts were about the NMRA weight standards, about the effect on the jiggles. Is that help, hurt? Is it indifferent, irrelevant?
You know what? As someone who's fairly enthusiastic about the NMRA, I have to be careful what I say. But I think those weight standards are fairly arbitrary. It's like, was it 1 ounce per inch plus something else? It's
And
actually
NSN3 and HO, yes.
yeah, yeah. It depends what it is. I think it's rather arbitrary, and I've heard a lot of people say if you have good free rolling trucks and you, like Steve was saying, you have that 3-point suspension working, the weight and the weight varying is not that big an issue. But I'm not an expert on a standards guy in the NMRA would shoot me for saying that. But I'm not sure that really is a big issue. And I don't think it stops the jiggles. It's not the weight per se, it's where that weight is. And like I say, I want to experiment putting that weight on the roof. Will that change that period of oscillation? I think it will, but will it cause other problems like making you string line it on a helix or something? Maybe, because the weight's in the wrong place now. So I don't know the answer to that one, but it's a good one.
Here's a comment.
Isn't the
Here's
NMRA weight based on tracking the cars better?
That was a goal, but where they came up with these numbers, I do not know. And I think it was more about making it consistent through a longer train, typically a standard gauge train. And the real railroad works with things of many different weights and keeps stuff on the track. But again, they're working in a different weight and gravity environment. So I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know why they have a weight standard at all, even other than I think there's a feeling if it's too light, yes, you will stringline it on a curve, which I think we can all imagine if something weighs virtually nothing, you'll yank it off on a curve. But once it's above a certain minimum, I'm not sure how much it is really matters. But that's just me bullshitting, right? So that's sorry.
So here's a comment from Steve. He just says to stop the jiggling, I tightened one truck on the car bolster, not too tight. So we've talked about that. Mike McCarville says, I have reduced the yo-yo effect on cars by doubling the springs inside the coupler pocket, assuming your coupler allows for that. Then Randy Scott says, in the diagram of the pendulum, when we turn the pendulum upside down, where is the center of rotation? At the journal, at the level of the axle, or where? Question mark.
Good question. It's probably somewhere within the truck, quite where it's rotating. It probably is, as the journal box is going up and down, is really how it can only really move. But we don't have those working on most of our models. So in our models, it's probably that loose screw that Steve was talking about, that's screwing the models to the bottom of the vehicle. That's where the movement is, to actually that it will be rotating around. Because the truck is fixed on the track, the vehicle is wobbling around above. That it's probably at that screw joint that we screw our trucks to the body of the vehicle. I'm guessing.
Right.
Good question.
Then Russ Segner says, add some drag to the caboose to lessen the jerking. That would be the coupler draw. One of the things I do with my railroad is I put my heavier cars to the front, the lighter cars to the back or to the end of the train to eliminate that streamlining effect. That's just me. So,
but weirdly, Mark, it may work better to stop that jerkiness by putting the heavier cars at the back to drag the tail down.
But then you also fall victim to the streamlining effect of pulling cars, the forward lightweight cars off the track.
Life isn't perfect.
No, it's not. Not at all. Any other questions for Robin here?
Just a
Keith,
comment.
this is Keith. I want to say something. I can't get on the chat.
Well,
Not
I'm
working.
sorry. We have blocked you from the chat,
Yeah, I
Chief.
figured that. I got blocked out.
I thought
Yeah.
we muted you for life as well, but oh well.
Can I make one quick comment about ON3 couplers and the
Yeah.
jiggling effect?
Quick.
I cut a 40 thou piece of brass wire, just the right length, sit it inside the coupler spring inside the box, and that gets rid of the jiggling effect. Like doubling up on the springs, I just take a 40 thou piece of brass wire, I cut it so that the coupler will still swing from side to side, but it eliminates that awful jiggling effect.
Yeah, and ultimately what we're all doing with all of these shortcuts is we're recognizing that our cars are too light.
Yeah.
So we're adding stiffness to try and simulate the extra mass. I won't use the word weight, but the mass of it. By the way, I brought this freight car onto my desk as an illustration. I asked Russ and other people last night, what scale do you think that is?
Looks like HO, but I think it's too big.
Yeah, it's 00. It's a weird 00
1/43.
freight car. 176. Someone gave it to me. It's metal. I just had it on my desk. The cats can't really trash it. It's really solid, but it's really cool thing.
One more question or observation about car weights. I have a bunch of old Tamalco high side jobs made of wood, and now there was no place on them to put a weight initially without this making the decking look bad.
Yep.
But if you put those things in the middle of a train, that lack of weight will cause them to derail.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so you have to start adding weight, but exactly how much it takes to make them stay on the track is indeterminate. But
I get it.
It clearly is important.
And I think part of the issue there, Bill, might be comparing it to prototype, right, where you often see empty cars in the middle of a train and it works just fine.
Yes.
It's proportionally, because of all of these effects, that mass, that weight rather, of that empty model car is far less proportionally than the loaded ones, the heavier ones around it. Whereas in the real world, our freight cars are actually quite heavy, and proportionally to the other ones, it's more similar. But in our models, an empty wooden Tamalco gone or flat car weighs nothing compared to maybe something next to it that has a load in it. That difference is huge. I think that's what might be causing the issue, that differential rather than the absolute values. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I've just learned to live with adding, I have some sheet lead
Yep.
and I had sheet lead into the car and live with the distortion or hiding the denting to keep them working correctly.
Yeah. Oh, you have to add loads, and you can buy loads if you want them that are made out of cast, die cast loads, whatever. They're good to use because they're actually heavy instead of making loads out of wood or something like that. Put a heavy load in there, and
well, I have heavy loads to add to them in addition sometimes. But yeah, the sheet lead that I got definitely that helps with everything.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
All right, Robin, are we ready to move on?
Yeah. Thank you, guys. I appreciate what I did this to spark a discussion and some ideas, and don't pretend to be expert. So hopefully it did that, and so I really appreciate the comments. That was actually really good to hear. So thank you very much, and thank you, Mark, for the introduction.